We're here for South by Southwest, which is all about entertainment, content creation. And so we are going to kick off Food Entertainment's Wild Ride with a woman who knows an incredible amount about all of that. So Giada De Laurentiis, another hand, please.
Well, thank you, Josh.
Yes.
And grazie, Christina, fellow Italian. This is really exciting. This is my first year doing South by Southwest that isn't music, the tech world of it all.
Thoughts?
And it's been really fascinating.
It's a fun time.
Earlier. Yeah.
It's a good time.
It's a really good time. And it's just interesting just to hear, the talk of what's to come and what people are talking about and innovating, and all the way people shop and think about everything, not just food, but
sure.
And I love the fact that food is such a big part of this conversation.
Well, I mean, it's partly because it's in Texas, it's in Austin, But actually, I mean, let's talk about food for a second, because I don't know, I watch a lot of Planet Earth, but I never presume to know anything about David Attenborough. But I saw you in person, I was like, she taught me how to make puttanesca, So yeah. There's something to the power of food content specifically, and that's something you've been doing for a long time now. I'd like to get your thoughts on what is it specifically that is the power of food content?
Well, I think first of all, we all eat. Every human being needs to eat, right? So there's an emotional connection one way or the other to food in general. It's also very visual, tactile, that it sort of explores all the senses. And I think that food has become such a big part of our culture, not just Italian food, just food in general. I think people have really come in this country to appreciate where food comes from, the sourcing of it, how it makes you feel, the branding behind it, associations with childhood, and I think family, all of those things that are connectors,
sure,
that create emotion and connection for human beings, which is what we're all looking for, is connection.
There's so many stories to be told, right? Every recipe, there's a story behind every ingredient. There's a story behind the recipe, how the recipe was developed. Now, I know that, you come from a family with strong entertainment roots. I mean, your mother was an actress, your father an actor-producer, your grandfather was a producer. Now, I've read that, you wanted to get in the kitchen, you didn't really want anything to do with that, and yet, now you have this sort of media and content empire. Do you feel like that background helped you at all?
Yes, my grandfather made over 600 movies in 60 years, starting in Italy and then moving to the United States. But the whole premise of everything that he did, and in the end that I do, is storytelling. Right. So my family taught me to storytell, and that's all I've ever done. Right. Yes, I cook, but I storytell through my cooking. That, in the end of the day, to me, is how we connect human beings to each other. Sure. Is through our stories. And that's how, I think that is how I have been able to build this. Not knowingly, but just following in the footsteps of how my family told stories, generation after generation, that were handed down to us. And then I just sort of translated them into the food, because every dish that my grandfather used to make with us and we made in our family had a story behind it. So all I did was reinterpret it in a more modern way and share it with everybody. And somehow that connected, and it just kind of grew the brand over time.
So I want to talk about two things that you just touched on. Connection, authenticity, and growing the brand. Let's start with growing the brand, because it strikes me that at a number of different points, you had to make a decision to make some sort of transition, right? I mean, whether that's from working at Spago to being a food stylist to then, Food Network, but then to cookbooks, to hospitality, to opening your own restaurants. How do you evaluate those transitions? Is that something that you're looking down the road, or do you see an opportunity and kind of react to what feels right?
I did not plan any of this.
Good
None
to know.
of it. I
never
wish
plan,
I could.
People. Never plan.
No. Some people, think of Martha Stewart. She planned everything. She literally had a roadmap, and she checked stuff off as she went by. I am the exact antithesis of that. I did not plan any of this. I don't think that it was in my realm of possibilities. I think when you're an immigrant in this country, it's sort of a little bit of a different mentality. You just want to be able to survive. You just want to
Sure.
be able to make a mark somehow. But what that means for a woman, I started this 35 years ago. I went to culinary school in a time where cooking was not hip and cool.
Yeah.
So it was a totally different perception. But I would just say that opportunities came, I evaluated them, I checked in with my gut, and I figured the pros and cons of it, and then I just jumped in wholly and hoped for the best.
Yeah.
I jumped out with a parachute and hoped I was going to land on my feet. And that's kind of what I did. And I think a lot of it has to do with my family had no expectations.
Huh.
I know
The
that
power of
sounds
no
really weird.
expectations.
I know. Because I come from a very traditional Italian family where women, you got married, you had kids. You got married, you had kids. Maybe you had a couple hobbies.
Right.
That's the
And you
extent
could
of
cook.
it.
You could cook.
Yes, and it would be preferable if you could cook.
Right.
But honestly, that's it. So they didn't have any expectations, so I just figured this was a free pass to kind of, I don't know, go with it, see what happens.
Have you always trusted your gut, or was that something you learned professionally?
No, I've always trusted my gut.
Yeah.
I tried to stay consistent with the message and not divert, because I think that's one of the things that happens when you get to a certain level. Everybody pulls you in so many directions. Oh, but you're successful at this, you could do this, and you could do... And I have been very careful about what I endorse. I've been very careful about partnerships that I do, that they always kind of represent the goal, but really that they don't tarnish all the work that I have done, and that I am always as authentic as possible.
One of the things we hear all the time about people who consume content, younger generations, authenticity is key. How do you create that across platforms? Like, how do you make sure that you're authentic on TikTok and on food Twitter and on your website and in a cookbook?
Well, TikTok, I don't know. I think TikTok, I've let my daughter kind of rule that one for me.
Smart.
She's almost 16, and she's the one that got me on TikTok, and she tells me what the trends are, and I kind of follow her lead. So I think that's the fun side, the playing around side that shows sort of the fun aspect of my relationship with her, and I let her guide that.
Well, let's step back, something a little less risky than a new restaurant maybe, but especially at a place like South by Southwest, what we see all the time, there's always another platform. There's always another way to tell a story. How do you evaluate those platforms? How do you know where to be and where not to be? Or is that just more trial and error and see what's fun?
I think when it comes to digital and social media, it's trial and error.
Yeah.
You just got to try a bunch of stuff, because I don't think anybody really knows. I think the algorithm is always changing. I think my team's always trying to figure that out. It's the topic of the conversation every day why does one recipe go viral and another one doesn't?
Yeah, right.
But I think for me, I have a feeling a lot of times I know what people are going to want to see or want to do. I know the key terms that, like, for instance, bolognese. Everybody knows what bolognese is, okay? So we have a recipe that's very popular. It's my simple bolognese. And we came up with a recipe that is a baked bolognese. Everybody knows what bolognese is. Then you add baked on top of it. So you think warm, you think cheesy, you think crusty. All of these other images that get conjured up when you add these words in. And guess what? That one went viral. So I think it's just kind of figuring that out. Or at my restaurant in Las Vegas, lemon spaghetti. I am now known for lemon dishes. Did I plan that? No, but it was one of my unique pastas that I decided to plug when I opened that restaurant. And now, after 10 years, I've sold 1 million of those.
Huh.
So it's just timing. It's figuring out what you really love and then running with that.
When I think of food entertainment, I think of, when I was watching you in Everyday Italian, like I said, like you taught me how to cook, right? So much food content now, it's more the idea of cooking, right? It kind of looks like cooking, and you get that sense, it's comforting, the hands and pans video. I mean, what's the sweet spot for you between food and entertainment? Like, how much food, how much entertainment?
That's a good question. I will tell you that on television and a lot of social media, you can't smell the food or taste the food. And I need to harness your attention very quickly because most people scroll almost immediately, right? Different than when I taught you to cook when I was doing Everyday Italian like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Attention spans were much longer. And I think now people want to learn on the go. I just have no patience. Our brains have been so impacted by social media, and we have so much information coming to us all the time that we can't spend too much time focusing. I mean, focusing is one of the biggest problems, right? We have a big problem focusing as a nation. And so my thought is that it's different. When I think of social media, I think of fast content, and I think of, yes, entertaining first. Even when I used to do, live television like the Today Show, it wasn't, at first I thought, it's about the recipe and they're not giving me enough time.
Right.
I can't teach you what to do in 2 minutes. And then I realized it's not about the recipe.
Right.
It's about me having fun with the co-host, entertaining you. Guess what? If I do that, you'll go back and you'll look up that recipe and you will make it for dinner.
You'll do the
And
work ultimately if you've been entertained.
Yes. So entertainment first, food second. And I do that in my restaurants too. Entertainment and welcoming first, because it's the first thing you see. You don't know anything about the food or how it tastes until you sit down, and that's probably like 30 minutes into the experience.
Right.
So I got to get you in the first 5 minutes of that experience.
Is that different? Is it more so now than it was 10, 15 years ago, do you think? I mean, is that accelerating?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Even
what's
with
the end
cookbooks.
point?
More photos because that's more entertaining.
Right. But cooking is, it's a craft, it's a skill, it requires hard work, I mean, is there a danger that people are very entertained by food and then just kind of, I don't know what the danger would be, but, the shortcut mentality that you're supposed to sort of get the download in 10 seconds, and then if you don't know how to make bolognese, which is a time-consuming process, let's leave it behind.
No, I don't think so, because even if you don't make bolognese because it's too time consuming and you loved being entertained by whomever, you're going back and you're finding something else that you might like to do. So I think that's why we have to grab you with the entertainment first.
Right.
And once we've locked you into that, you will find something.
Or I suppose even maybe you just go into a restaurant and you know more about bolognese than you did, right, before
Everything is a nugget of information, and that is the goal at the end of the day. And, it happens in my restaurants, it happens in my cookbooks, it happens on Giada. I want you to leave feeling a little more empowered. And usually that means a nugget of information you did not know before. And that is enough for me.
And I'm wondering, what do you find the hardest platform to create content for your specific brand?
What do you think that is, Carol? Because my COO of Giada. I think it's. Don't we think it's TikTok? They're all very different. The one that I do most often is Instagram. I prefer it. I understand it.
What do you like about it?
I'm a visual person, and the visual portion of it, it's so easy to use. But I know that a lot of people have been telling me lately that X is a place where they can have actual conversations that you can't actually have on other platforms. So I feel like depending on your age group, you like different platforms. My daughter's on TikTok. That and Snapchat, that's it. She could care less really about Instagram, definitely not Facebook, and no X, that's not interesting. So I think it depends on the generation, and I'm trying to hit all the different generations, which is the hardest part of this.
Right. It's got to be, honestly, it's got to be exhausting. It's like, it's so much the daily content creation, right?
Yeah, Josh.
Yeah.
It is exhausting.
That's
Ask my team, they're pushing me all the time, and I'm like, no, no more. I'm also a believer that you can't put everything out there. There has to be some mystery in this game.
Yeah.
Because the mystery is part of the entertainment.
I want to go back for a second. You were talking about 20 years on Food Network. I read something somewhere that when you started Everyday Italian, Food Network was getting mail kind of saying, what have you done? Why have you hired this actress, this model to make food, right? And, you're classically trained, Le Cordon Bleu in Paris. You worked at Spago. But nowadays, if you're a model who wants to make food content, like, whoa.
Go ahead,
Go
sure.
ahead. Right.
I
Yeah,
know.
yeah, for sure.
Everybody has a cookbook. I know.
Yeah.
I know. Well, in those days, you have to remember too, like, I broke the stereotype of what people think an Italian cook should look like.
Sure.
Right? We had certain
was a
people.
no-no.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think anytime you do something that's out of the box and that isn't within the realm of how people think, you're going to get criticized.
Yeah.
And it's going to happen. And so that's what happened. And I just figured if Food Network gave me a chance to stay on, I would show them through my work over time. Consistency. Stick to the same messaging, make it easy, lots of storytelling, make it authentic, and eventually people will understand that this is just a vessel. It has
Sure.
nothing to do with my abilities.
Now you have, we're talking food influencers, and while completely understanding like the great tradition of self-taught cooks and cooks always going out and learning wherever they can. But you might have a self-taught cook who's a self-taught content creator, and that person blows up because the content is great. Does it matter? Does it is anything lost there for not having some of that classic training?
I don't know. I think that's a question for the younger generation. I don't think they care. If they're entertained, they do not care, I don't think. I think for the older generation, yes.
Yeah.
Their idea is trust comes from someone who has experience.
So tell me about, you started to touch on what you see for the future of Giada. Now, if you had that transition from doing it to yourself to, wait a second, there might be a business here, to, wait, there's definitely a business here. And, clearly, you're somebody who sees trends kind of ahead of time. Do you see us going back into more of that brick and mortar, more of that hands-on experience? Everything can't be through a screen, can it?
I definitely think that we are on a trajectory of, yes, the brick and mortar will still stay here. We will also have direct to consumer. People want to touch and feel, and part of the experience can't happen digitally only. That true connection can't just happen over a screen. You actually do need to have some tactile eye-to-eye experiences.
Sure.
And I do think that brick and mortar will be around. I just think that we're going back towards the mom and pops.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well,
you know how
it's
it went
that
out of fashion?
authenticity again,
Yeah,
like we touched on.
We're going back there again, and people
Yeah.
are caring about locally sourced, or going to a bookstore that's in their local area that's run by a family who lives 2 miles from them. People are starting to care about that again in a way that they had forgotten for a number of
Or
years.
maybe never knew, depending on,
Yeah.
how young the consumer is.
Yeah.
Let's just talk about Italy for a little bit in terms of your travels, in terms of your sourcing. One of the things I love about Giada is, I just love the sourcing aspect of things. I love, especially with Italian cuisine. The tradition of the right ingredient from the right place at the right time of year, used in the right dish. Give me something recent that has surprised you from a country that you know so much about.
I think that pasta, I'm going to use pasta as an example. I think that we're very limited in this country as to when we think of pasta, and we don't realize that certain cuts go with certain sauces. And I have found that in doing our own line of pastas, I always thought maybe the longer shapes would always do better.
Yeah.
And we have some really fabulous shapes, tripolinis and all, but the shorter shapes are the ones that have sold out every time. And one in particular is nodi marini from the south. They're little sailor knots, and I find that people love the intricate shapes of pasta, and that is sort of the eye-catching connection that they have to it.
Right.
And when they cook up, they have a lot of little holes and nooks and crannies that the sauce gets. And a lot of people have told us it's really fun to eat. It's really fun to eat. And I think for a lot of people, long pasta is not fun to eat because they don't know how to eat it.
Right.
It makes a mess. It squirts all over your shirt. You have to use a spoon, or you got to cut it. So I think this aspect of ingredients, specific ingredients that we all know, being fun in a way that I don't think that I actually computed. Everybody knows San Marzano tomatoes in this country.
Yeah.
But there's a million other tomatoes that just
Sure.
nobody knows about. And my favorites are little datterini tomatoes, little baby tomatoes, which are very popular in Italy and not here. But they make for the most exquisite sauce, super sweet. You barely have to cook it. I mean, you can eat them straight out of the jar, they're so good. And I think for me, it's introducing ingredients that people know and love and use, but in a fresh, new, unique way.
Right.
A little bit of a spin that is just ever so slightly different, but not so different that you're like, oh, I can't do this. It's just so foreign to me, I don't know what to do with it. And that has been really the fun part of all this.
But that's a very
It's a fun discovery.
It really works for an American audience. But I think about like when you go back to Italy, sort of that older generation, they don't. I mean, they like things the way that they've always been.
Correct.
Is there some sort of tension there that you've noticed, like even just in your travels, for example?
I think that a lot of Italians, especially regionally, they want to get the message out there. They are so proud of what they grow or what is known in their region. And they feel like Americans only know, I mean, the tiniest little part of what Italian is. And so they're very eager to get the messaging out there. I never have a problem with it. I really don't.
Yeah.
They really are eager to share the message.
I mean, it's like you said at the top of the conversation, it is such a deep part of that culture, right? It's inextricable.
It defines who they are.
Right.
And you can't separate these dishes and this culture and this heritage from these people.
Yeah.
It's the thing you cannot take away from them. I mean, if you think of immigrants that come into this country, and a lot of them make their family food. They might change their name. They might force their kids to speak English and assimilate that way, but they always hold on to their food traditions because that's the only thing that connects them back to their home country.
It's a shared language, too, amongst immigrants, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, another hand for Giada De Laurentiis.
Thank you, you guys. Thank you. It was great.
Wow. Mille
What an
grazie,
honor.
everybody. Thank you so much for your time.
It was wonderful.
Truly inspiring.
It was wonderful.